Ethology has shown that sexual behavior differs from other instinctual aspects of behavior in many ways. We have a need for water, food, air and things like that. These needs continue all the time. But sex behavior is not like that. The need for sex differs from the other instincts. For example, in most animals, there is the reproductive season, and in the reproductive season, mating behavior occurs only at certain periods. And once that short period is over, then there is no more mating behavior. And the reproductive behavior as a whole functions in a sort of harmonious way, in which mating is only a part. And also the reproductive behavior is triggered by certain environmental stimuli, like for instance the coming of a certain season. Only at that time the reproductive behavior starts functioning, starting with the territorial phase, then the courtship phase, then only the mating phase comes, and then it is followed by the phase of rearing children. And the final resolution occurs when the offsprings become independent. So what about the animals in whose case the environmental stimuli are not present? What about caged animals? What about animals in the zoo? Several studies have been conducted on caged animals as well as animals in the zoo. One observation is that many caged animals do not reproduce at all. If the triggering stimuli is absent, then the reproductive behavior doesn't start, and many animals do not experience any particular problem if the initial stimuli are not present and the cycle does not commence. But suppose the cycle commences, the right seasonal triggering is there, and the animal feels the need to compete, then the animal may become very aggressive, and if other males are not present, it may attack other animals. For example, your dog may bite you if other dogs are not present, or elephants enter a period of rut, and initially they may show violence. But if the reproductive cycle doesn't start, the animal experiences no discomfort. But once the cycle starts, then it has to continue through all the different phases and reach the phase of resolution. If you stop the animal in the middle, there will be catastrophe. The animal may show many signs of maladjustment or pathological behavior. So therefore, sex is a very powerful instinct, and once the reproductive cycle begins, unless it is led to the final phase of resolution, the animal is highly stressed up and it may show maladaptive behavior of various types. Now, coming to the human situation, we find that human beings are now in a kind of perpetual zoo. Environment has many aspects: physical aspect, social aspect, and so on. Human beings in their natural environment live in a forest or a forest-like place, in a small village close to the forest. So you need trees, you need rivers, streams. So in traditional societies, males used to compete in hunting, showing that one is more efficient than the others. And then a boy who earns more money or is able to look after a family gets a girl in marriage. And for courtship behavior, there should be again certain environment. For example, the boy and girl should meet in moonlight. They should go for walks along the stream side and so on. And then finally there is the marriage ceremony, which is very similar to the arena behavior of many animals. If the reproductive behavior does not come to its resolution, human beings are also terribly maladjusted, just like the animals. Caged animals as well as animals in the zoo show perversions. That is when their reproductive behavior is not allowed to continue along species typical lines. If the right environmental supports are not there, animals show homosexuality, animals show violence, and so on and so forth. One of the important social conditions for proper functioning of the reproductive behavior is the aspect of group size. The optimum size for the human being is a small village where everybody knows everybody else. There is sufficient number of members of the opposite sex to make a selection, sufficient number of males to compete with, and so on and so forth. Everybody has an identity in a small village. But in modern cities, there is overcrowding, overpopulation. Many animal experiments have been conducted to study the effect of population density on sexual behavior. For example, initial experiments were conducted by Calhoun. Rats were kept in a pen or a cage and allowed to multiply. They were given enough food, but when the population size increased beyond a critical size, there was total disordered behavior. That is, rats started killing each other. Not only that, they started doing rat rape. And females which were allowed to escape did not try to escape, but they remained to enjoy the excitement, though they could be killed, raped and killed by other rats. So there is total disordered behavior. And that is what we observe in modern cities also. There is increased violence, crime. There is another reason why aggression and sex are related. Across several species, it is seen that animals reared together do not copulate. Animals prefer an animal of the opposite sex from another group to animals of the same sex in their own group. For example, if you bring dogs together, if you bring up dogs, a dog would show a preference for a dog of the opposite sex in another house rather than another dog of the opposite sex reared in the same house. the reason for this is that sex is linked to aggression. In fact, in several animals, including man, the center for aggression and sex are close together in the brain. You cannot stimulate one without stimulating the other also. When one is stimulated, the nerve stimulation flows onto the other center also. So, that is why there is an element of aggression in sex. When a man is aggressive, he becomes more sexual. Females also show aggressive sex when they are more dominant and when they are aggressive. Testosterone, which is the male hormone, is found in females also, and when a female becomes more dominant or aggressive, her testosterone levels also go up. So girls who are in sports, for example, show more testosterone and show more male characteristics, and they are more aggressively sexed than girls who are submissive and who prefer to do the role of a housewife rather than go for work. So career conflict is very real for most women, because their inheritance, their biological inheritance is programmed for housekeeping and child rearing, while in modern times women want to work and be able to earn their own money, and this creates problem for males also, because males are traditionally programmed to see their wife looking after the house and rearing children. Now he is confused, because in modern times women also work, and they even compete with the husband in making money. And then there are stimuli which arouse the male instinct for reproduction in the larger sense. So traditionally women used to dress differently. They used to grow their hair, they used to wear typical feminine clothes, but in modern life women also cut their hair, and boys grow their hair, and boys and girls wear almost the same kind of dress, unisex clothes as they are called. So this creates sex confusion in both boys and girls. So in the absence of proper environmental stimuli, perversions tend to occur, like animals in a zoo. So that's why now homosexuality is on the increase, male homosexuality as well as lesbianism, because the proper triggering stimuli are absent and confusing. Now the biggest problem is that once the reproductive cycle starts and it is not allowed to continue in the normal sequence of courtship, nest building, mating, child rearing and so on, the energy which is released at the initial stage, if it doesn't find its normal outlet, it will lead to overflow into channels which are often highly maladaptive. So one consequence is that sex may become an obsession and a compulsion. That is, in the absence of a normal pattern of reproductive behavior leading to resolution, if it is arrested, the sequence is arrested at some stage, then the energy seeks outlet through ways which are highly maladaptive and stress producing. So many aberrations of sex life in modern society can be traced to this absence of the normal sequencing of stages of reproductive behavior. Now another thing which has been observed from animal studies is critical periods. During an animal's growth, there are many critical periods. The first critical period is maternal imprinting. That is, the newborn animal looks for a mother. There is a search image, and the animal looks for an object in the environment which is very close to the search image. It may be an object of a certain size, of a certain color, showing a certain movement. And once the animal develops an imprinting to the object, it is difficult to change that. So many experiments show that there can be mal-imprinting. For example, a human being may wear a certain dress having a certain color and pretending to assume a certain form and making a certain movement, and the offspring gets imprinted onto the man as its mother. Once the imprinting takes place, if the actual mother appears, the offspring will ignore the actual mother and will only follow the man, will take food only from the man. This is called mal-imprinting. And one interesting consequence is that once the animal reaches adulthood, it will not mate with its own species members, but it will show maladaptive sex behavior. It may show sex behavior with human beings if as a small one the maternal imprinting was imprinted onto a man. Now this has again consequences for human behavior. Now in modern hospitals, the newborn baby is not taken care of by one person. In fact, the baby is often handled by several nurses and given to the mother only at a later stage, which means the imprinting may take place to the nurse and not to the biological mother, and sometimes not to one person but several persons may handle the baby. So during adulthood, that person may not be able to relate to a single mate. It may go after several mates, because as a young one there was no proper imprinting to one mother, one person as mother. In many rich families, there may be several nurses taking care of the child. So the child fails in relating to a single person as mother. So when the child is grown up, it may not trust anybody, because during its infancy it was not handled by a single person. The mother may be going for work, abandoning the child in a daycare center, but the child thinks this as the mother being not trustworthy, and the child may lose faith in human beings, and as an adult the child may fail to trust any human being, especially in marital relationships. One important question is it possible to transcend sexuality altogether? Is continence possible? There are two important considerations here. One is the triggering stimuli, the territorial phase where males come together and compete. So if a person is not aggressive and not competitive, competitive. He does not see the other males as objects to compete with. Then the cycle may not start. All the problems arise if the cycle starts and then arrested in the middle. That creates all the problems. But if it doesn't start, then does not seem to be much problem. Animals which are reared in isolation and not exposed to competition may never show reproductive need. So one solution seems to be not allowing the cycle to start in the first place. The second point is with regard to the question of love. In Western society, or particularly in English speaking society, there is a confusion between erotic love and other forms of love. For example, the term love denotes all kinds of positive relationships. But in the Eastern religions and Eastern cultures, there are different terms representing different kinds of love. There is the concept that there are three types of love: eros, philos and agape. Eros is the kind of love which is associated with reproductive behavior and courtship behavior between a male and female in the reproductive cycle. But there are other forms of love. Philos, which is brotherly love, is actually the bond existing between animals of the same sex. It is related to hunting together. Young boys like to play together, and young girls like to play with other girls. This is philos, that is love between people of the same sex, and usually it is associated with group activities like hunting or cooking together and so on and so forth. There is a third kind of love which is called agape. Agape is spiritual love. This kind of love is not a part of the reproductive cycle. So if a person transcends the sex urge, it doesn't mean that he has no love. He may be having the agape type of love or the philos type of love. Freud, who studied sexual behavior extensively, particularly from the pathological side, was fully convinced that all higher activities of man, like science and culture, result from sublimation of the sexual urge, and he himself remained a celibate after middle age, believing that all his scientific creativity came from sublimation of sex. Probably he was able to reach the level of resolution of the reproductive cycle, and therefore not bothered by the earlier phases. Love and hate are two sides of the same coin, especially if you mean by love erotic love, which is the kind of love which is responsible for pair bonding in the reproductive cycle. If you love a person of the opposite sex in the erotic way, and if the person rejects you, or if the person forms a pair bonding with another person, then the erotic love turns into violent hatred, and this leads to all kinds of violent activities, and which we observe in society all the time. But agape has no opposite. It is a universal love, and it doesn't turn to hatred. Many criminals have shown that they have some kind of arrested sequence in their reproductive cycle. Either they have been exposed to wrong types of sexual behavior in early childhood, or they have experienced rejection from a partner with whom they try to form a pair bond. And this arrested sequence causing violent reactions are behind many criminal activities. Even the urge for unsatisfactory possessions. For example, the modern businessman goes on making money. He is never satisfied. He wants more and more. This can be related to the territorial phase of the reproductive cycle, which doesn't pass on to the courtship stage. The man who is going on making money has failed to form a right pair bonding relationship with a satisfactory female, and therefore he continues to make money, unconsciously hoping that the right female who corresponds to the search image in his mind will appear. And many people have related artistic creativity to the courtship phase. During the beginning of the courtship phase, you find the birds singing, birds dancing, birds doing all kinds of things to attract the opposite sex. It is said that this kind of erotic love is the stimulation for many creative acts. At the adolescent stage, many people start writing poetry, romantic poetry, and then if it doesn't lead to consummation, if he doesn't meet a proper person for pair bonding, he may continue to write poetry, never be getting satiated. So therefore, many aspects of human behavior can be understood in terms of the reproductive cycle and its different stages, and how energy may get trapped without proper consummation and leading to proper resolution. So if you want to understand pathology of human behavior, you have to study animal behavior, and you have to think of ways by which the arrested sequences can be cleared and human beings can be led to a proper resolution of the instinctual energies. So many animal experiments are being conducted now to study how you can handle arrested sequences and how the maladaptive behavior can be corrected. So we may have to devise ways and means by which the kind of disordered behavior which is seen in modern human beings can be handled more scientifically, so that human suffering can be alleviated.